Hi, welcome to Bum Life. Here, Kansas City, Missouri. I was just hanging out on the other side of the bridge this morning where I was sleeping. Slept there for like 2 nights. It's a nice little spot in the shade. It's pretty hot here in the fucking daytime. But today, like, some city worker came through and he's like picking up trash. And he's like, you're not supposed to be here, right? It's like, yeah, I know. I'm packing up soon. I'm leaving. But, he was cool. Like, he asked me if I wanted some water, and he started talking to me, and he's like, so, what's your poison of choice? It's like, alcohol. He's like, oh, you got a cup? And he, like, pulls out a bottle of tequila, like, pours me a little cup of tequila. So that was pretty sick. And then he was like, started asking if I believe in Jesus and shit. He's like, I was just like, I don't know, man. I don't know what I believe. I do know what I believe, but I don't really want to have that conversation because you're not going to understand me. We're not going to agree. And of course, he was like, oh yeah, like I used to be addicted to meth, and Jesus don't care if you're an alcoholic. Jesus just don't care. Like it's all good. Like cool, whatever. But we were talking, and basically it's his job just to, like drive around, pick up trash, and tell the homeless people they're not allowed to camp there. That's his job, whether he likes it or not. And he recognizes how things are. It's like, yeah, it's mostly because of those apartment buildings over there. Like, those are new, and like, they can't charge the rent that they want to charge if there's, homeless people wandering around the neighborhood. So they want me to kick out the homeless people. And there's this fancy dog park over here, like people pay like $15 to let their dog run around, and they get drunk at the bar that's inside of the dog park. Like, that sounds cool if it didn't cost money. You get drunk and let your dog run around. Wish they had that for homeless people. But and they're building. There's a new stadium over there. That was funny. I walked past the stadium, and it's a CPKC stadium, which is a railroad company. It's a Canadian Pacific and a Kansas City Southern merged into CPKC, and they're building a new stadium that's gentrifying that part of Kansas City over there. But yeah, I was thinking about that stuff. You know, if you're not familiar with the term gentrification, that means when property developers buy up real estate in a traditionally poor neighborhood, and they make it fancy and nice, and they raise the rent, and it pushes out the people that have lived there, not just the homeless people, but the renters and the homeowners that have lived there for a long time. Like the cost of rent increases because you have these luxury condos built next to your house and so forth. You know, that's what gentrification means. Uh, I used to live in Eugene, Oregon. The Whitaker neighborhood used to be like a more of a working class, lower class neighborhood. There's still a lot of homeless people there. I think in the 90s it was considered like the anarchist capital of the U.S., which is kind of interesting. Uh, but it became, I think, starting in the early 2000s or so on, it started getting more gentrified, affluent, wealthier people moving in. Uh, I feel like partly because of Ninkasi Brewing, which is a beer company. I love beer. I love craft breweries, and so do rich people. It's one thing we have in common. We all like to get drunk. But people are like, oh, they opened up a nice brewery in this neighborhood. Maybe I should move there and shit. It looks cool and trendy and hip. And, the residents of the Whitaker like sort of tried to fight back. Some people were like, intentionally leave, like dirty syringes and trash on the ground to like try to scare people away. Because, like that was a poor community. What else can you do? That's all you can really do is try to scare people off. It's like you see my bum ass getting drunk on the corner, you might be like, yeah, I don't think I want to move to this neighborhood. Looks kind of sketchy. You know, I rented an apartment in the Whitaker neighborhood briefly for like a few months. It was like 2016. Just like a fucking shithole studio apartment with a shared kitchenette area. I think the rent was like $450 a month at that time in 2016, and I don't even want to think about how much the rent is now. That fucking shithole apartment, it could be $1,000 for all I fucking know. But this is just the natural evolution of things. That people who have money, they develop things. They move in, they get what they want, and the people without money, they get shoved other places. Maybe the reverse happens as well. Maybe wealthy neighborhoods lose their wealth, and then the poor filter back in. Like kind of happened in Detroit back in like the 70s or whenever that was. You know, now Detroit's sort of getting gentrified again. It's all just cyclical. Is it good? Is it bad? It just is the way that it is, I suppose.